Thanks, Tarek. And again, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are globally, everyone. I don't think I could have said it better, Tarek. It's very decentralized kind of panel that we have here, which is very much the spirit of the space. So just a quick rehash. My name is K Van Peterson, or KVP for short. I have the privilege and honor of being a global macro strategist out here for Saxo Bank in Singapore, where I've been since 2014, and also very lucky to be in Singapore as well. And pretty much been covering crypto and digital assets since 2014 as the crazy guy in the corner, as is all things when they're kind of new. And it's been, really interesting to kind of be talking about it from back all the way then, obviously seeing the inception into kind of the bull market initially that we had in kind of 2017, where I think a lot more people caught wind of what was going on. Obviously the crazy bear nuclear winter market afterwards, where, asset prices in some cases went more than 80% lower in the cases of Bitcoin. And as Tarek also pointed out, a lot of tokens that will never be remembered that went completed kind of zero. And then interesting now to see, just 4 years later, how different things are in 2021 and what I still believe is a new bull market. So I don't, by no means do I feel I'm an expert, and the people that I know that breathe, sleep, and eat crypto every day will also tell you it's almost impossible to kind of keep up on what's kind of happening. I would like to just offer maybe just a quick macro meta view, if you will. My job here is really more to just maybe give some of you some food for thought. Think of it, the space, in maybe a different way. It's not to convince you. I'm obviously an advocate. I've obviously also been invested for many years, so I'm as biased as a politician looking for a re-election, right? So I'd like to maybe summarize it in three kind of little key points, right? One will take financials. I'll give you context, maybe how to think about kind of the space. Two, I'll take it to numbers that are different. So it's going to be more people of different kind of, I guess you could say, technological kind of, innovations as, again, a potential blueprint of thinking about the space. And then the third will be a little bit more of an ad hoc, right? So meta view, if you think about crypto right now, the total value of the listed crypto tokens, and if you go to coinmarketcap.com, you can see there's over 10,000 tokens. There's about $1.5 trillion in value. So what does that mean, right? If you think about global wealth, it's probably 400 trillion. If you actually think about investable assets, it's probably much less, 160 trillion. If you think about global equities, it's over 100 trillion, and probably the US equity market is obviously the biggest slice of that. That's $50 trillion. If you think about global family office wealth, probably about the same, 50 trillion. And if you think about the value of gold globally, that's 11 trillion, right? So I think this is kind of the important thing to just think in context. So you look at Bitcoin, depending on where the price is, 30 to 40K range, which we've been in for quite a few weeks, it's around 720 billion, or actually 600 billion now. Also tells you something about kind of the volatility in the space. But what does that mean? That means it's under, 0.2% of world assets. It's less than 0.5% of investable universe of assets out there. It's under 2% of total US equities or global family office wealth. And it's maybe, circa 5 to 7% of gold value, right? And the context here is obviously to give you an understanding or an idea of still how early it is, despite the crazy astronomical growth that we've seen in a very, very young space, so to speak. Some other numbers that I think are key to keep in mind, and one thing that I'd like everyone to remember is the number 15. Why is that important? 15% is the CAGR, which stands for compound annual growth rate of the G4 central bank balance sheets since the GFC. So to put it differently, since the GFC, central banks, basically globally, have been printing money and expanding their balance sheets, right? So what that means is the level and supply of fiat going into the system globally has on average been increasing by 15%. Now, What it actually means is that's your hurdle rate every year. If you're returning assets, and whether it's a business, whether it's in the stock market or currency market or bonds, whatever you're trading, if you're doing less than 15%, you are actually underperforming the fiat supply that's coming in. Why is that key? That's key because that's hugely inflationary. And if you pull any asset, major asset, and you go back since the GFC, you measure it to now, you'll find that almost every asset underperforms except for one, and that's crypto, right? Just top of mind, if you think about going back to GFC, S&P, vastly underperforming, right? Bonds, naturally so, commodities, naturally so. The NASDAQ is right on the 15% hurdle on a KGAR. And if you find individual tech stocks, then they are also, you can find something like an Amazon that's done 30% since the GFC, but those are the exceptions, right? Whereas when you have something like Bitcoin, it's done upwards of 3 digits, 250% and up. So the point here is you also, for the first time, have the availability of an asset class that is deflationary. In the case of Bitcoin, and that's definitely not the truth for all tokens, we know by the code, and code is law, that there'll be 21 million in supply. And we also know that probably 4 million keys, roughly that, have been lost. So actually the total real supply eventually will be something kind of closer to 17 million. And for all of you gold bugs out there, and it's not to say you can only have one or the other, but even gold is always increasing by supply by kind of 2%. So this is kind of meta frame to think about, and maybe how to think of it from a numbers perspective. It's a deflationary asset. It's still tiny in regards to overall allocation globally from a financial value kind of perspective. And Bitcoin, at least from my viewpoint, there's a lot of crypto tokens that will do very many different things, but Bitcoin, I think, is first and foremost in the store of value kind of camp. So point number 2, a little bit shorter. Think about global population. It's about 8 billion people today, right? You think about cell phone users, about 4 billion smart cell phones, right? You think about internet users, it's close to 5 billion, right? And you think about blockchain wallets, only 70 million. So this is basically telling you, in regards to the penetration, we've barely done 2%, in context to people who are on cell phones and people who are, using kind of the internet. It's still the early kind of inception kind of phase. People who are technologists and go back, and it'll be interesting to hear, Jorge's point on this later, think that if you look at the internet, we're basically still in 96, 97. That's kind of how early we are from a contextual kind of perspective, right? And if you look also on the globe, the unbanked adults globally is 2.5 billion people who don't play in the centralized system, who don't have a bank account, who don't have an ID, who can't get a loan, who don't have a credit card, right? Things that people in Singapore, Dubai, Toronto, and all the developed markets completely take for granted. So hard to put a value on that, but if you think the cost for a person a year from financials is $1,000, you already get into the $1 trillion mark. And just the last point on my side, which is point number 3, the big difference, obviously, since 2017 to 2021 is the institutionalization, governmentization, regulation coming in. We've seen the likes of PayPal, the likes of Square, people who are in the payments side. We've seen corporate treasuries looking to diversify their balance sheet into a decentralized kind of asset. We've seen, obviously, a lot of the hedge fund kind of pioneers. And now we've even seen governments looking to put Bitcoin as legal kind of tender.